The Center for the Improvement of Human Functioning International presents this luncheon lecture. Today's topic, Purifying Your Space, Strategies for Detoxification and Healing. Your presenter, Garrett Sullivan, MD.
Well, thank you guys very much. Thank you, Jan, for the introduction, and I'd like to thank the Center for inviting me to come down and visit with you guys today, and thank you guys all for coming out. As she mentioned, I'm Garrett Sullivan from KU Medical Center, currently a fellow with the Integrated Medicine Program up there. Yeah, and this program is wonderful. It's basically come right out of the mission of the center here. Riordan had this as a vision a long time ago and finally made it a reality. And our program director actually holds the Riordan Endowed Chair for orthomolecular medicine, and he is simply trying to, the goal is to try to spread the word of what goes on in the style of medicine that's been promoted through this center, and promote that with the greater medical community at large. And so that's part of what I try to do, is just try to educate people that there is this other side of medicine out there that comes out of the orthomolecular medicine model. Now, how many of you guys, this is your first time? Okay, so some of you guys might not know what the orthomolecular model is, and essentially this is the belief or the philosophy that if you can provide the body with the right molecules at the right time, the right place, this is what really promotes health. And so really we only ask two questions when we see a patient. What does this person have in their system that they need to get out of there? And at the same time, what are they missing that they need to get into their system to work properly or optimally? So anyway, I'd like to talk to you guys a little bit today about purifying your space, just strategies for detoxification and healing, namely how to get the things that are detrimental to our health out of our system, and at the same time support that process with the things that are required to do the job. So, just a brief background about this idea of cleansing and detoxification. This has been a therapeutic goal for centuries. I mean, from the fasting that you read about from biblical times to the regimes of bathhouses, spas, sweat lodges from the Native Americans, the use of saunas and whatnot. The concept that toxins do accumulate in the body and cause various health problems has long been a fundamental tenet of traditional healing systems. So welcome to the modern world. I think this is a nice image here. We're just bombarded with stuff in this day and age that has never been before seen in our world. We've now got these persistent organic pollutants that just permeate our environment. Really, this is a modern phenomenon, only been around for a few generations, and we're still trying to figure out what the implications of this really is. Basically, we're conducting a huge experiment on the whole planet, and there's no controls. We're all in the middle, and every single living thing on Earth now has been shown to be carrying a lot of this stuff inside their systems. Anyway, we're just bombarded. It's all over the place, and we can't get away. So in the modern industrialized society, this is just from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. These are some stats that are eye-opening. But in 1994, 2.2 billion pounds of toxic chemicals were released into the environment of the U.S. And this is just from the United States. This isn't to mention China and all the other industrialized nations out there. In 2002, this more than doubled, and now it's 4.7 billion. And I don't have a stat of where that is now, but probably it's increased even more. So these exposure to toxicants, I'm throwing around some different words. Toxin, is anything that can be shown to disrupt the system. A toxicant specifically is one of these chemicals that is synthetically made that finds its way into our system. Really, most of these have really hit the scene since World War II. And again, we really don't know the full implications of these. Sometimes it takes a few generations to really see the downstream effects. We'll talk about some of these nuances as we go. But anyway, interestingly enough, in the early 70s, actually, this became recognized that this might actually be a problem and that we need to be careful about what we're exposing ourselves to. Lead really became a leading thing that was, we tried to protect ourselves from. But at that time, about 60,000 chemical products were grandfathered in, and virtually no testing has ever been done on that group of chemicals. So we've got tons of different pesticides that go in our food every day. Every single family home typically has upwards of 10 gallons of hazardous materials in the home. And then if you do check for humans, check for levels of burden in each human, for example, more than 400 synthetic chemicals can be found in the average person. I want to talk a little bit more about this body burden. Now, for a long time it was thought that a baby developing in a mother's womb is very protected. It's in an isolated environment, and it's going to not be exposed to a lot of this stuff that's floating around out there. So anyway, a working group decided to take some cord blood and just take a peek at what's in there. They only checked for 413 things, and like I said, there's already 80,000 things out there. But just of those 413 things they tested, about 3/4 of those things did show up. And so there was about 287 chemicals that were found to be inside the cord blood going straight into the baby as it's developing. Interestingly enough, of those chemicals, 180 are known to cause cancer in humans or animals, 217 are toxic to the brain and nervous system, and 208 cause birth defects or abnormal development in animal tests. So again, that's not a good thing to have floating around in a baby that's rapidly expanding and growing and developing. One thing I should mention about these babies, a newborn baby, when it's born, it basically triples in size in its first year of life. So that's a lot of development. And interestingly enough, if you take a small child, like say 6 years old, I've got a daughter who's 6 years old, their degree of toxic burden can be predicted on whether or not they were breastfed. Now, I'm not trying to say anything bad about breastfeeding because it's far and away the best source of nutrients, but it's also the single most effective way a mom can detoxify her system. So it's kind of not a good thing for the babies. But anyway, we've got to figure out how to clean this up because that stuff would not be available for sale on the shelf if you could buy breast milk out there. Just too much stuff in there. So anyway, a lot of this stuff, these toxic chemicals, are actually fat soluble, and so that's why it gets in the breast milk. It's very fat heavy liquid. But talking about this, if you actually go in and take a fat sample out of some of these, out of any given person, and this was data that came out in 1982, and actually this National Adipose Tissue Survey that was ongoing for a number of years, actually the funds were cut for that. And some sources say because the findings just became too annoying and just were too disruptive to the politics of the time. So anyway, this has been picked up now by the CDC, and every couple years they do another survey. But even in 1982, already every single sample that was tested had all of these things in there. All of these things are known to cause cancer, cause developmental problems, immune disrupting, hormone disrupting. And this is just scary stuff, and we really don't know what the implications of this really is. So the time to act is now. These recent studies on diesel exhaust, plastics, pesticides make clear that the full cost of continuing with these old technologies and rates of use of toxic materials may well include permanent damage to the gene pool and brains of the youngest generation. Problems of neurologic development and reproduction that stem from early life exposures will not be reparable later, no matter how much money is available. So this is kind of a grim statement here. But right now, I don't want to talk too much on, well, anyway, let me just continue on. I'll start to get to the good side of the story here in a moment. I don't mean to be putting too much of a heavy burden on everybody's shoulders here. Anyway, what we're talking about here is detoxification, basically the process by which we can biotransform these toxic chemicals, these dangerous substances, and get them so that we can get them out of our bodies. And some more definitions. A toxin is defined loosely as just any substance that can cause structural damage or functional disturbance of the biological organism. So as you can see, these aren't just limited to environmental things, but also the everyday things that we just create from metabolizing our everyday materials. For example, we have to metabolize our neurotransmitters, our hormones, and such and so forth. And if any of those get off balance, it can disrupt the system. So a lot of these toxins actually are things that we create on our own. The xenobiotics, though, on the other side, these are things that are completely foreign to the system. And so you'll hear me talking about xenobiotics, again, just things that are not native to us. We maybe have never seen them before. And in our modern society, we just don't know quite how these are going to affect a functioning human being. So where do all these substances come from? Again, I'm going to focus on how we can start to clean ourselves up, and I think it's important to know where these things are found, and so how we can minimize our exposure as much as possible. So I did have a slide on most all these things, and we could just go one by one. But I didn't. Again, I don't want to make this too heavy of a presentation because I do want to focus on the improvement of human functioning, not the detriment of it. Again, I'll just point out a few of the leading things that do cause a risk or pose a risk to us. Phthalates, these are very prevalent in the system. And all of these really, again, for the most part, either are going to be immune system dysregulating, hormonal dysregulating, or endocrine disrupting. They're going to be developmentally disrupting, neurotoxic, for example, and cancer causing. These phthalates, for example, they're found in a lot of personal care products. They're the plasticizers that make like your fingernail polish not break as much. Just little things that you need some durability and ability to work with these things so they don't chip and things like that. Polyvinyl chlorides, they get aerosolized from our shower curtains. They're all over the place. Styrofoam, again, all this stuff is found in 100% of us. But styrofoam, for example, it makes you stop and think when you drive down the street and you get a glass of lemonade from a small child, because the more acidic the substance is that's being held in that styrofoam cup, or the hotter it is. So like, for example, you'll go to your local convenience store, get a styrofoam cup of coffee. If you measure that styrofoam cup before the fluid's in it, pour out the fluid, and measure it again, it's lighter every time. So that's not a good thing to know. That's just going right into the liquid, straight into our body. Bisphenol A, this has been around a long time, about 100 years, and it was first explored as an endocrine modulator, a close relative. I bring this up because it's a close relative of diethylstilbestrol, which you guys might have heard about. This is a medication that was used to prolong labor, used pretty heavily a number of years ago. But the ill effects of that did not become evident until 2 generations later. It was found that the child of the mom who had that drug developed fine, they didn't have any problems, but their kids all had birth defects. So anyway, these things, it might take a few generations before they really show up as to what they're really producing inside of us. The unfortunate thing about bisphenol A is it started to become known, well, this other medicine was better at the endocrine modulation, but they found that these make great little bottles. You can start to fill your spring water in there. They're very sturdy, durable. Also, they spray the inside linings of all the cans that we get our canned foods out of. And these are pretty much inert, and they're not going to cause problems until you heat them up. So I don't know how many of you guys have a plastic water bottle in your car, for example, but it gets pretty hot out there, so a lot of the stuff just starts leaching out as it's set in the sun. Another thing about bisphenol A and the flame retardants, most of this stuff actually floats around on dust particles, and that's where we get most of our burden. And there's a lot of people allergic out there to dust, and you have to stop and consider, is this really the dust they're allergic to, or is it some of these other things that are floating around on the dust? Again, going into petrochemicals, Teflon, Gore-Tex. The thing about Teflon, and this class of compounds, Gore-Tex is also in that same class, Scotchgard, for example. There's a big movement to try to get a lot of these things banned because they actually do become aerosolized with heat. They do break down over time. It's all over a lot of people's pans at home. And it's interesting that something that would become aerosolized with heat would be something that you put on a pan that you stick on the fire. So I don't know. It's something to just be aware of. Gore-Tex, I've got a lot of it at home. I go camping a lot, and in recent days, my stuff's getting kind of old, and I'm starting to wonder, how safe is it for me and my family to be sleeping in this tent? I think I need to get some new equipment because it's starting to feel a little tacky to me. So I just know that these things start to aerosolize, and you're just breathing them in, especially as it gets warmer and warmer. Again, all this stuff, pesticides, trihalomethanes, these are found in a lot of water, end up finding their way into the water supply, like chlorine, fluorine, bromine, for example. They're very, they can disrupt the endocrine system again. Heavy metals, this is probably our oldest toxin. It comes out of volcanoes, it's in the water tables, it's, a lot of industrial processes kick them around, anything that uses coal, for example. Then you get into building supplies, perfumes, food additives. There's over 10,000 in use today, preservatives, pharmaceuticals. And I also put on there EMF fields. These are electromagnetic fields. The jury's still out on these. You know, cell phones are a relatively modern phenomenon. There's just as many negative articles about the implications of these as there are positive articles. You don't really hear about the negative implications, but one stat that I think is a little disturbing, at least to me, although the source of which is still not yet clear, but in the last 10 years, the incidence of brain tumors in children has doubled. Now, I don't know if that has anything to do with the fact that in the last 10 years, cell phones have become much more prevalent, but it's still something I haven't bought myself a cell phone yet, although we do have one for the family that we use rarely. Okay, so we haven't talked about water safety, but I think this is a funny picture. There's a lot of funny stuff in the water that you've got to be careful of. Yeah, and again, you know, these aren't just toxic chemicals, but a lot of pharmaceuticals also have to be processed the same way as all these toxic chemicals. And our body really doesn't tell the difference between whether or not a product comes from a well-meaning company or, you know, environmental or a industrial company that is producing a known toxin. But anyway, this is showing up in more and more water supplies around the country. Oh, so this comes back to the bottled water issue. Maybe you think drinking bottled water is the way to go, but there's a website I have on one of your handouts that you can put your favorite spring water in there and show what some different labs have analyzed as being in that particular bottle. Again, this is becoming a landfill nightmare because these are bulky items that we're just accumulating at a rate that's phenomenal. Now, this is talking about just plastic bottles, but plastic bags, you know, you get groceries from. There's another stat about that. 60,000 per 5 seconds are used in this country. So that's a lot of plastic floating around. And these are all petrochemicals, too, that create this. These are require billions of gallons of crude oil to produce. So it's something that we need to try to get a handle on. Okay, so I want to bring this up because we're talking about oil and bottled water. I saw some photos of some Gulf War camps, and you can see these just giant stacks, these flats of these bottled water just sitting out in the desert sun, you know, 120 degrees out there, just cooking, and all those phthalates, all this bisphenol A, all those plastics leaching out into the water. Anyway, this was a very real syndrome. I'm sure probably some of you guys have heard about this Gulf War syndrome. It's just a bunch of nagging symptoms that we didn't really know if this was real or these people just trying to create a system where they can be supported after they get home. Was this all psychological, or what is the issue? And just this last year, within the last year, both the National Academy of Science with this Committee on Gulf War Veterans Illness put out this statement: scientific evidence leaves no question that this is a real condition with real causes and serious consequences, and exposure to toxic chemicals was identified as the cause of the illness. The reason I want to bring this up is because look at this symptom profile. These are just the vague, nagging things that we all have a degree of that, you know, we often just attribute to old age, or, you know, as far as like arthritis is concerned, or, you know, just losing your memory just a little bit. Oh, that's just a part of aging. You know, but these are just nagging little symptoms that we really don't have good explanations for. We just have to try to cover up with symptomatic medications or what have you. Anyway, knowing a little bit more about the story, we need to try to figure out, okay, maybe this is from toxic exposure, and let's try to support you to try to get this stuff out. So this gets back into the detoxification process. We've got a lot of diseases out there that we just don't have a firm handle on where they're coming from or if they're even real, because a lot of these things are subjective. The patients are just telling us these are the symptoms they have. We've got no way to really measure or verify if this is in fact real, as far as like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and some of these things. But then you get into cancer. These are measurable things. The rates are increasing, as well as with neurodegenerative diseases, developmental and behavioral issues. You know, we've got ADHD, ADD, autism, the rates of which are just skyrocketing, all kinds of inflammatory conditions that affect almost every single disease entity you can think of, and the list goes on and on. And if you ever know you have an exposure to a certain thing, or if you have somebody that you're interested in that has a certain disease entity, this is a great website you can go to because you can put in either the disease or the toxin or both, and you can kind of see the crosstalk between these things. First, like if you have diabetes, what environmental exposures are linked to that, or if you're exposed to this particular thing, what things to watch out for as far as the diseases that are associated with that. So really, this is very individualized. Basically, we have all these toxins floating around out there. They can become triggers themselves, or they can make other things become triggers that were otherwise not triggers before. And this really meets you where you are. This depends on your individuality, you know, where you're coming from, if you're, you know, optimally supported with nutrients or not, or if you've been under a lot of stress, or if your genetics just make it such that you can't perform some of the functions that are required, some of the mediators involved. And this whole interplay is really what gets us into trouble at the end, is how heavy the toxin burden is, what is your predisposition, and what is mediating the ill effects of these toxins that we're faced with. So this really touches on the spectrum of vulnerability. That's what we're talking about. Some people, you know, they could spray pesticide all day long and never have a problem with it, whereas if some person walks into a room and even smells it, they're going to get debilitated. Now, an interesting thing about this whole process is that once you are triggered by something, often you become more and more sensitized, so that the more and more things trigger you. So if you're triggered by something, then you might just become more triggered by more and more things, like somebody that walks in that has a little bit too much perfume, and then next thing you know, you can't even drive down the street because there's so much exhaust coming into your car, or whatever the case might be. But the way the toxicologists set permitted exposure levels is that they have the spectrum of vulnerability. They just set the permitted exposure level, and already by definition, you're going to have people that are going to be harmed by that level of exposure. Most people aren't, but already you can start to get into the issue that there are going to be some people that are sensitive. So what do we do about this? Really, I want to just touch on, we really don't know what's going on with this. For example, most of the toxicology studies have been looked at individually. So you have a toxicant that's studied with lab animals or whatnot. Again, very few of these things are actually studied. One thing I should tell you, the way the laws are set up right now in this country, which is very disturbing, a product, basically any product can be utilized and introduced into the environment, and it has to be proven without a doubt that it's harmful before it can be recalled. Now, that seems kind of like a backwards way to approach the situation. And in Europe, it's the exact opposite, and they actually, the companies have to prove without a doubt that their product is safe, and then it can be introduced into the environment. I think that's a much better way to do it. Europe has banned thousands of different products. The United States is just a handful. So, and even some of the things that have been banned, like Durspan, this is a pesticide that's no longer in use, but it was just sprayed religiously in our schools and daycares and everything. And anyway, you can still buy this product even though it's been illegal to buy now for a while, just because the companies are allowed to sell what they have until it's gone. And this stuff lasts a long time. And the thing I want to mention too is that, again, all these things are studied, if they are studied, in isolation. And for example, if you're a smoker, you've got 5 times the risk of having lung cancer as somebody that doesn't. But if you're exposed to asbestos, that's 10 times the risk. But if you actually are a smoker and exposed to asbestos, then you're 55 times more likely to get cancer. So a lot of these things really synergistically come together and cause a lot more toxicity than otherwise would be. And virtually none of this stuff is studied in combination. And here we are running around with hundreds and hundreds of things in our systems. So anyway. So again, we've got to take these things, render it less toxic, and able to get into our urine, sweat, breast milk, stool, what have you, and get it out of our bodies. Again, most of these things are lipophilic, so it does require some active energy to get it out of our fat stores and get it mobilized and get out of the system. All tissues do have some activity, most of which is in the liver, but a lot of other tissues have activity. Actually, all tissues do. And I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about these different processes. The stomach is a very important first pass metabolism for a lot of stuff. Over the course of our lifetime, we're going to process approximately 25 tons of food through our systems, knowing that our food is laced with a lot of stuff that maybe we don't want to know about. But one interesting thing about this is that if we've got a nice flora of friendly bacteria in there, this is wonderful because we've got this nice force field, basically, this barrier that when we put something dangerous into our system, it's going to hit those bacteria first before it gets to our cells. So we've got those guys protecting us. But then once it does get into our cells, we've got these antiporters that once it gets in there, it just kicks it right back out and lets it come back through again. So we've got these kind of mechanisms in place to keep things in the stomach and in the digestive tract if we can keep it there. We do have some of the enzymes that allow for the biotransformation, so it can just get right back into the stool and really not get into our systems whatsoever. This gets disrupted, if you get into digestive issues, if you've got a lot of bowel inflammation, if you've got yeast overgrowth, what have you. So this, again, is just a flow chart of how this works. If you've got a hydrophilic compound, like over on this side, which means it likes to get into the water, you can get rid of that very easily. Just drink a bunch of water and it'll just flow right out. And then the more and more non-polar you get, or the more and more polar you get, the more you're just going to get soaked up into the fat, where it's very hard to mobilize. And this is another interesting thing. We've got an epidemic of obesity that's going on in our country. And you wonder, is it, if you look at these fat cells, there's just hundreds of stuff in there. So you think there's any connection here? That's something that we've got to kind of come to terms with. But really, most of the people that have the ability to look at this stuff, this stuff is not even taught in medical school whatsoever, which is a little bit disturbing. And even in residency, you never get into this kind of stuff. So hopefully, this is by far and away the #1 leading issue in our day and age in the 21st century here, is that we've got to get a handle on this burden that we're all faced with. So again, we've got to get these things oxidized, reduced, hydrolyzed, and then conjugated so that we can get them into the stool, the sweat, the urine, and whatnot. So this is what happens. We've got the phase 1 and phase 2 aspects of this. The phase 1 are these enzymes that are the first pass. They oxidize or reduce these molecules, basically put a functional group onto the toxin. And that way, then you can have this secondary phase of enzymes come in and put another group on there that allows it to get soaked into the fluid or to the stool or what have you. But the real issue is if you have the phase 1 that's activated, but you're not ready to support it with the phase 2. And the phase 2 is what's really dependent on our nutrient support, and this is where we get into problems when this gets off kilter. For example, if we get imbalanced in this process, we have a good, robust phase 1 system, and this can be induced. Cigarette smoking, for example, can induce some of the phase 1 systems. For example, it can help you metabolize coffee. And if you guys have seen some people that are big smokers and they're big coffee drinkers too, you might be able to see why they can handle both of those, because they both kind of help each other. They just aren't as sensitive to the caffeine. But anyway, if you get this phase 1 enzyme that's very activated and you're not ready to conjugate it with the phase 2 enzyme, now you've got a little free radical that can now bump into an enzyme or bump into your DNA and cause a mutation, or bump into your membrane, and then now you can't process your nerves transmission very efficiently, or you get disruption there. And this is where we get into problems. I wanted to talk to you, again, this talks about liver detoxification. Again, this is happening all over our bodies. But this is a nice slide. I've given you a handout for this that you guys can refer to. It just gives you a sense of some of the nutrients that are required to support these systems, and the things that you can make sure you have plenty of so that you can do this stuff efficiently. And this gets into the biochemical individuality, and we have to know where we are in the greater spectrum of this, and know where our pitfalls are and how we can support ourselves to better get the job done. Another thing about this, again, looking at that spectrum of vulnerability, these phase 1 enzymes are very amenable or open to phenotypic variation. These depend on the age of the person, the any other inflammatory condition underlying or going on concurrently. If you have another disease ongoing, you're going to disrupt this. And namely, another important piece is that we all have these little polymorphisms that change the way these things work just a little bit compared from one person to the next. So this is where we can get into some pretty interesting studies that are becoming more and more prevalent that allow us to really look at our individual risk profiles and see where we are in this greater spectrum of vulnerability. Now this is an example of one of the result pages of one of the tests that we've started to use pretty frequently, especially when people get into neurologic issues. You know, they might have Parkinson's disease or ALS, or they've got a history of Parkinson's in the family. It seems like everybody, as they get older and older, start to get a worse and worse tremor. Interestingly enough, we're starting to see the same polymorphisms over and over again. And these first two, the 1A1 and the 1B1, if they've got a neurologic issue that's developed, almost across the board, they're going to have a polymorphism in one of these two categories. And these are primarily the enzymes required for a lot of the environmental toxins, like solvents and a lot of plastics and things. And as you go down the list, like the 2C19 and the 2D6, the 3A4, this is where most of the medications are being processed through. And a nice thing about this, well, I'll touch on that in a second, but so that's the phase 1. This is the phase 2, and you can look to see where you have a gene polymorphism regarding, for example, your ability to add the 1-carbon group, or these secondary enzymes that have to follow up the phase 1 enzymes. So now, like for example, this patient needs some methylation support, or the ability to transfer the 1-carbon group. We're finding out, you've probably never heard, or many of you may not know what this methylation step is, but this is something else you guys are going to start hearing about more and more. Because this is actually a conditional, the ability to add this 1-carbon group is becoming recognized as being integral to maintaining our enzymatic metabolism from a number of different standpoints. It's required for metabolizing our neurotransmitters, metabolizing our estrogens and things like this. So now if you have got a methylation defect, you're much more likely to have ADHD, ADD, bipolar disorder, problems with the dopamine side. You might get into issues where you've got an addictive nature and whatnot. But and this is a beautiful thing because you can support these and just feed right into them and give your body those pieces just by supplementation or using your diet to upregulate these systems. And the good thing, what I was going to mention again, these P450 enzymes, if you already know now which enzyme you have a problem with, all the medications or all the drug companies are required by law to list the P450 enzyme that is required to break down their particular medications. So, if you go into your doctor, you've got these vague conditions, and your doctor says, well, here, try this. It's Elavil or amitriptyline, or if you've got a little pain, try this naproxen. If you can look on this, these are some things that you'd actually just be throwing fuel to the fire, so to speak, because you're going to have a hard time, and you're going to be the one that gets side effects to these medicines. So it doesn't mean that you can't use these. We just have to be careful when you introduce these types of things into your system. Again, this is another larger list of, some of these process a lot of stuff. A lot of the antidepressants that often get put, a lot of people with these types of complaints get put on antidepressants, for example. You're going to disrupt some of this even more. Upset stomach, you see all the proton pump inhibitors. You can just buy these over the counter. Upset stomach is often a side effect of having a detoxification issue. And like this person, he is a terrible setup. He can't use glutathione whatsoever. Now this is one of our most powerful antioxidant systems. It lines the fluid of our lungs, for example, and helps us metabolize all the things we breathe in and keeps us protected. Now if you don't have the ability to utilize this system, you've got no way to protect yourself. So you're going to get into the chronic lung disease, all the things that, a lot of different things are implicated by glutathione deficiency or depletion. So how do we go about trying to develop a detoxification lifestyle? I suggest that we all settle down and we need to become nerds. This is a nice little concept. Just avoid the known sources of toxicity. Your nutrition, very important. It must be optimized or you're not going to be able to get this job done too well. Exercise, very important, just for getting the fluids mobilized, promoting lymph drainage and sweating. For example, sweating is still one of the best ways to get some of the toxins out. Rest, you need to have proper sleep and just keep yourself supported. Stress management's big in this too. If you've got a bunch of emotional baggage on board, a lot of that can be just as poisonous as any chemical you have in your system. It can be very upregulating of your hormone or endocrine system and can throw things off kilter. And then just using detoxification as a therapeutic activity, just getting into the habit of utilizing a sauna from time to time, or going to a massage therapist where they can manipulate your tissues and help you mobilize some stuff. Even using the fasting cautiously, I should say, or using the elimination diet, where you just really purify your diet and keep it as basic as possible. This can be helpful for your detoxification systems as well. Now, one thing I should mention about this fasting, a lot of this stuff really should be done with a person that's more healthy, because the sicker you are from some of this stuff and you go on board with the fasting diet, you might mobilize a huge burden of stuff that you're just not ready to handle. So it can make you very sick. While it's all stuck in your fat cells, it's not floating around being biologically active. It's only once you mobilize it, then it's kind of like getting a little bit of like flu-like symptoms. And it can be very problematic for people, and it can be very difficult to start to work on these people that are the more burdened you become. So you have to be aware and use these cautiously, because you can get very sick from some of these things. Even sauna, if you're not prepared and you spend a little too much time in the sauna, you can come out of there worse off than when you went back in. And if you're not ready to conjugate these things so you can get them into your urine or to some way to get them out of your body, you're just going to stir them up, make yourself sick, and then they'll just get soaked right back in. So you really need to be careful on trying to beef up your phase 2 systems, and we typically always focus on that first before the phase 1 systems, or any kind of process to try to stir this stuff up. So let's touch on nutrition, because this is actually the good news about this, because all of this stuff is upregulatable, where we can use our diets and what we put into our bodies to really support what our bodies are trying to accomplish. First and foremost, you should try to stick to as pure and basic and fundamental a diet as you can. And this, I mean, when you look at the label of your food, hopefully it just has the food's name on there. It doesn't have a list of things that have 10 syllables listed to it. I kind of laugh because we cook a lot at my house, and I haven't yet come across, having to ask my wife, honey, where's the sodium silicoaluminate? I can't find it anywhere. That's just not stuff that we typically put into our foods. There's 10,000s of these things that sneak in there every day. If you start to look around and buy some good wholesome bread, it's hard to find any that doesn't have high fructose corn syrup in there. And this is to process a sugar of that nature from the corn, it does require mercury to get that processed the way it does. So that's another source that's been looked at more and more. Actually, aspartame is another interesting thing. A lot of people might drink diet sodas because, Diet Coke, because they're trying to lose weight, and there's just got all these toxins that are accumulating, so they think they're helping out. But anyway, the aspartame gets broken down first to formaldehyde, and then the other thing, now I can't remember, I was trying to think of this on my way down, but it's another thing that really you don't really want to just take a big swig of. But those are some things to consider when you're looking at some of these substitutes. Again, if you're going to want something sweet, try to use something real or some sort of substitute like agave nectar or something that's not going to put as much stress on your system or do things that we really don't know exactly what they're going to do. Fruits and vegetables, for sure. High fiber, keeping your bowels moving is definitely important, because you don't want to be constipated and try to be processing this through your stool, because you're just going to give it more of a chance to reaccumulate. Fruits and vegetables, the more color, the better. The cruciferous vegetables principally are known to be the most profound upregulators of glutathione, for example. And also, I put a handout there in your packets about some of the cruciferous vegetables, because those are very powerful. And if you're just wanting to get started with trying to mobilize some stuff, that's a great way to get started, is just introducing some of these, like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, some things like this. Protein is good. A lot of the amino acids that are required for phase 2 detoxification can come from this. Some other things here you can read through. Again, knowing where you sit, you can then start targeting your supplementation. For example, some of us just are predisposed not to be able to support our nutrients like an average person, and it might take us 6 pounds of broccoli to attain what we need to get out of it. So that just might not be practical, so you might just want to go straight to the supplement in that case. So vegetables, again, I can't, you really need to get the vegetables in there, but you want to be careful about which vegetables you choose, because some of these are much more laden with things that maybe are going to be a detriment than a benefit. So you got to be careful about this too. Now we have a choice. Again, I've touched on most of this stuff, but one thing that should come out of this is just try to get in touch with the people producing your food and know where your food's coming from. And whenever possible, there's a big movement about sustainable agriculture, the locally produced agriculture, now I forgot, this CSA, we're a member of the CSA, which is a community-supported agriculture group, where we actually buy a share of a local farm, and we support that farm, and they in turn give us a bag of groceries or a bag of their produce each week, and it's a nice trade-off, and now we know that we're getting some good, wholesome food. This isn't just about what we grow, but also about the animal handlers too, because the animals can be a source of problem too, because most of the antibiotics in our country are actually given to the animals to promote growth. Chickens, for example, they really are dense animals, and if they're full of growth hormones and antibiotics, that tissue that you're going to be eating is going to be much more heavy laden with this stuff, just because it's so much more dense. And another thing that's an interesting concept, we talked about xenobiotics. There's also an idea that's been tossed around here in recent months about xenohormesis. This is an interesting concept because if you consider the feedlots, and as you get closer and closer to slaughter of a lot of these animals, these aren't known for being sanitary places, and it's very stressful for these animals. And the closer they get to the end, I mean, they're just starting to kick out stress hormones like you can't believe. So right before they're killed, all the food, the meat just has this huge influx of all these stress hormones, gets stuck in the food, then you go home, cook it up, and now here you go, you've got this huge influx of all these stress hormones that didn't even come from you, but yet they're still biologically active. We already know so many ill effects come from being activated from stress, and you might as well try to just keep your own under control rather than introduce some poor animals into your system. So, going back to the food, a lot of this plastic, they only really become a problem if you heat it up. So be careful about putting this kind of stuff in the microwave or in the dishwasher even. They always say microwave or dishwasher safe. That means the product will still survive and it'll be in there, but it doesn't mean the food is going to be safe when you use it, because again, the stuff will come out into the food. The cookware, again, try to stay away from Teflon and try to get back to the stainless steel. Cast iron, I still think is the best way to go. This only gets better with age, actually, and you can leave a legacy for your children and grandchildren and hand this down, in your will, and they'll be grateful to you for having something healthful to eat on. Again, microwave in glass or ceramic, and try to use glass bottles whenever possible, even in your car, or the aluminum or stainless steel bottles. There's a lot of companies now coming out. I put a lot of references together in your packets that give you some places to go. Keep an eye out for shampoos and things, soaps and things. I mean, it would be astounding to read the label of your shampoo you use at home, and oh my gosh, I don't even know what that stuff is in there. So you've got to be careful about what's in there, and just be conscious of the fact that there's a lot of stuff the body product companies, really there's no oversight to these. It's a self-regulated industry, and really who's doing the studies that show that these things are safe? There's not much going on out there. Again, this gets into pesticides. There are different things you can use so you don't have to use these heavy-duty chemicals that are known to be harmful. I told you about that pesticide that was used for 40 years inside schools every single year. They've now banned that, and they've introduced another one, but actually the first studies that they've been doing on that show that this is actually more neurotoxic than the first one. So anyway, you just got to be careful about this stuff. So then, again, going back to the baby stuff, you're going to be asked to attend a baby shower at some point in your life, I'm sure. Just make a stand and just start to promote these products that you can give to these babies that are going to be, not the plastic bowls and the teethers that are known to release stuff that then can get stuck in their system. But try to use the eco-friendly toys. There's a lot of toy stores and baby stores that are cropping up around the country that can really help you get stuff that's going to be safe for them. And it's interesting, and it kind of makes me cringe at home because all of our kids' stuff is all plastic. And I feel like it's the adults that maybe can handle the plastics better than the kids because they're rapidly growing and so forth. But it's them that get, all the stuff that's going to be the most harmful as they grow. So building supplies is the same way. A lot of people say, okay, I've got this mold issue in my house. We just have to redo this room or whatnot. They'll stir up some stuff, not use proper protection when they do that. But then they'll put new products in that are outgassing and can make people sick too. So a lot of these new products, you've heard about them in the media, I'm sure. But one thing you can do is called bake your house, where you can get it all set up, open all the windows, and just turn the heat up as high as possible. Leave your house for a couple days, and that'll help promote the outgassing and just get it over with and get it dissipated out of there so that when you get back in, the people that have done that we've worked with have been able to tell a huge difference once they got back in. There's also the particle board, or the the drywall board. They make a soy-based product. It's not even more expensive. It's completely biodegradable, no outgassing. So there are some bio-friendly products that are available. This goes with mattresses, furniture. There's all kinds of stuff you've got to watch out for. A lot of these, again, have these flame retardants that end up getting on the dust and just getting into us. You can use a lot of just natural fibers and things that will help keep yourself protected or keep your exposures low. We can get a little bit political about this because maybe some of the policies out there, if I've done my job, you might get a little disturbed about the way we do things. But really, most of the burden comes from just what each of us does individually. So you really just need to start at home and just help the movement grow of people being conscious about this kind of stuff. So it's not a problem of them, but something we just need to take into our own responsibility. And so just if you put it into a step-by-step process, first of all, just try to clean up your own diet and your lifestyle, clean up your personal environment, promote a healthy lifestyle for you and your family, and become an example for those in your communities and your families and so forth. And then cultivate a positive relationship, a healthy relationship with your neighbors and how to communicate about this. And really, it's just a matter of getting the information out that what the degree of this problem really is. So this all kind of stems from this precautionary principle. We as physicians, you can put parents, caregivers, as just society members. We must act on facts and on the most accurate interpretation of them using the best scientific information. That doesn't mean we have to wait until all the information is in, but once we can start to see that there is a pattern and our health is dependent on what is going on, we should be prepared to take action to diminish those risks, even when the science is still developing. Again, we know a lot less than what we just don't know a whole lot about what's going on out there, and it just highlights the fact we really don't know what we're doing when we're throwing all this stuff out there that's just getting into everything that we just don't know the full effects of. So is there a relationship between these rising levels of all these things and the environmental toxins we're faced with every day? We just need to use some caution about this and move forward. So I like this picture. I don't even know if this is real. It's a pretty interesting one, but it says wrong way, and here the train is just going right off the edge. People are taking pictures. But anyway, that might be where we're headed. But anyway, yes, it's a scary issue, a lot of hard work to address, but any small bit we can contribute will be worth it. And yes, we all can do it. We owe it to the children. These are mine. And anyway, this is where I'll stop. But, yeah, I'll open it up to questions if anybody has any about anything.
Raise your hand and we'll be around. You said that in the medical schools they're really not teaching this. Is there any improvement in that scenario coming down the pike? Any hope, glimmer of hope?
You know, I think it is because one thing, I mean, when I went to medical school, this was only a few years ago, we had just a handful of lectures on nutrition, even at all. And we know these are the basic building blocks of what our bodies need to work properly. And just to be already on board with all of these xenobiotics, or namely all these pharmaceuticals that are totally foreign to our systems, is kind of already jumping downstream. You really just need to look at the system you're faced with and how you can support that and use your native system to support what it is you're trying to accomplish. Now this is improving, and it's projected to substantially improve on the degree of nutrition education students are getting, which is a great start. As far as this detoxification issue, I mean, most of the people that we should be learning from really just have their, you know, as one person said it in a lecture I went to one time, they've just got their head in the sand. Even at the CDC, it was interesting. There's a gentleman who gave a detoxification lecture I went to last December, and he speaks all over the world about this kind of stuff, or the nation. And he was approached after the conversation about from this lady. She said, "You've mentioned some great stuff, and I think some of the people I work with would be interested to hear some of this. We've got this little working group that we're interested in some of the implications of this. We'd love it if you'd come and talk to us." And he's like, "Well, I'm a little busy. I'll see what I can do. Let me have your card, and I'll check it out." And this woman was from the CDC, and she said, "You know," and he said, "Are you serious? We're supposed to be learning from you guys." And they said, "Well, yeah, we just don't really touch on this stuff too much, you know." And it's just like, you know, so it's a big issue, and I mean, we're just scratching the surface of what this is really, what the implications of this is. But I think it will improve because we can't get away from it. It's getting out into the media. I mean, it's a big issue.
Would you have any comments on dealing with mold in a house from wet basements and such? Please.
Yeah, mold can be difficult. I mean, definitely there are some mold treatment people out there, or industrial, you know, I don't even know how to say that. There are people out there that can help you deal with mold issues in your home. They'll come out to your house and treat that for you. Again, it's a very difficult situation, and people get that mold inside of their system, and it can be very hard to get that out of there. Some of our sickest patients we deal with at our clinic have a documented mold burden that we have to deal with, and that is a difficult one. I don't have any specific things I can tell you right now, but it is well known that mold is very much a burden, and there are avenues by which you can address those. And I can't tell you right off the top of my head exactly how best to address that, but there are resources out there for you.
I want to know about PAM. People use that, and you know, when you spray it, for one thing, it's a long kind of spray, ruins the atmosphere, and then it smells.
Yeah.
What have you learned?
Actually, you know, before I came down, I was trying to search through my cabinets to see if I could find any examples of anything I could just say off the top of my head. I could not. I mean, once you start getting conscious of this stuff, you start to just pay attention to those products. And I actually don't know all the details about what's in there. But again, my recommendation is just try to keep it pure and keep it things that you recognize on the label. If it starts to get into these chemical things, you have no idea. You know, an interesting thing, you know, a lot of things, even the natural products, you know, like the organic sodas and stuff, they'll put natural flavors on the label. Now, I was at a nutritional lecture one time, and they said, "Does anybody know what this is?" And it was this huge list of all these chemicals. I mean, it was this huge thing, and nobody even could guess what it was, but it was natural flavors, you know. So you don't really know what that is, and it's just a loophole where they can just say, "Okay, this is natural flavors," and then they can just put all this stuff in there.
That's the problem when we read the label.
Yeah. So, but they really are supposed to tell you the majority of things. And if you see one of those blank clauses like that, you just got to be careful. You're like, you know, that's natural, but you know, what does that really mean? I mean, you know, it's interesting.
Yeah, I have a question. If once you detox, is it something you have to keep up
If you're predisposed and you have like a genetic abnormality where you can't, you have no way to protect yourself with one of the given enzyme systems, you really need to keep that in mind and try to support yourself. And you might have to do that for the rest of your life just because you're not going to have the ability to do that. So once you recognize what you're dealing with and you can slowly start to diminish that burden, you might not have to use as much, but it's something you're probably going to have to keep an eye on.
But if you build your immune system up, wouldn't your immune system, once it's detoxed and once you build your immune system up, be able to throw that stuff off?
Yeah, it's not all just your immune system, but it's just these little enzymes that are found in the cell surfaces, you know. Yeah, you definitely need an immune system, but these enzymes don't necessarily depend on the immune system to work. So this is stuff that disrupts the immune system that if you can start, you don't even have to have a functioning immune system at the beginning to start to mobilize some of this stuff, just because we know the enzymes that are required to do that. So it's kind of separate from the immune system.
So if you do detox diets like a couple times a year, that sort of thing, other than drinking a lot of water and trying to stick to mostly either fasting initially and then fruits and vegetables, or I don't know, sometimes they'll say protein shakes, what do you think helps move it out of your body besides just water and a little bit of sweat? Like the milk thistle, they give you certain, what couple things would you say that you really needed to take into consideration to do that?
Yeah. Again, the best way is to use your diet, your food. But again, you mentioned the fasting part. The thing about the fasting part, you definitely can mobilize some stuff because you're going to jump into your fat stores to get energy. So once you mobilize those fat cells, you're going to kick out some of the toxins with it. But while you're doing that, you're not at the same time getting the nutrients in that are required to help you get that out. So again, some of those fasting, you know, you really kind of need to prepare yourself for the fast and really beef yourself up before you jump into it, just so you have enough reserves to be able to get that out. Again, it can be very powerful. There's some people that swear by it. The healthier people are going to be able to tolerate the fasting more so than the people that are really sick and toxic. And so the supplements, some of the ones we turn to most often is a product called SAT, silymarin, artichoke, and turmeric. In that one list that showed the nutrition section, that I just had a listing of stuff. Those are some of the common things that are turned to that have been shown to be most helpful. Does that answer your question somewhere?
In continuing.
Oxygenation really helps too. They're like the hyperbaric chambers can help promote detoxification too.
In continuing with that, what about, is it on? What about juicing?
Yeah. Juicing, I mean, that's trying to just keep it pretty minimalistic, easy to digest. I don't have as much experience with the juicing diets. I don't know. I don't have a whole lot to tell you about that. It'd probably be easier on your system as far as the digestion is concerned. And this is probably, I hope, stuff you're juicing yourself, so you're not just buying juice, because a lot of the juices you buy at the store end up having a lot of sugar and stuff in there. So I can't really comment as much as I'd like.
The preceding program was presented by the Center for the Improvement of Human Functioning International in the Bright Spot for Health Lunch and Lecture Series. To inquire about additional health-related information available on DVD, audio CD, VHS, or audio cassette, simply call 316-682-3100 or drop by 3100 North Hillside in Wichita, Kansas. To discover more about the Center and what we have to offer, be sure and visit us on the web at www.brightspot.org.